Well, first of all, happy Easter. Happy Easter, and this is the Christian day of the year. Today we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. And the resurrection of Jesus is the foundational event on which Christianity is based. You know, remember as Paul said, if there is no resurrection, then we are the most deluded of all people. But if there is a resurrection, and we believe there is, then our faith is solid. It's the foundational act on which Christianity was founded. And interesting to mention, we measure time by it. So does the world. We're in the year 2022 since this happened. You know, they tacked on artificially to, 33 years that Jesus was born. But basically, Christianity began with the resurrection, and time started over with the resurrection, which isn't just a fanciful thing. The whole world is in the year 2022 since the resurrection. We measure time by it. Now, what does the resurrection mean? Or what's the meaning of the resurrection? Well, first of all, it's such a rich reality that's impossible to, I could speak for hours on this and so on. Maybe in terms of an image, it's like a finely cut diamond. If you hang a diamond in the sun and twist it, every time you twist it, there's another sparkle comes off. So, the resurrection has a physical dimension. We believe that Jesus physically came out of the tomb. And that means something, not just for people, but also for the planet itself. Where Paul says all of physical creation is waiting to be freed to experience the resurrection, not just people, but mostly for us too, it's a spiritual event. And now, again, that sounds vague. So to concretize that, I'm going to put it into a story. Some years ago, I was at the Anaheim Religious Education Conference in Los Angeles. That's a big conference. Some 40,000 people come to that. And they have certain events in an arena where you get 6,000 or 8,000 people. And this was one of the masses in an arena. And we were probably between 6,000 and 8,000 people in this arena. And the speaker was a woman called Maya Angelou. If you don't know her, look her up on the internet. She was this Black woman who was larger than life. And, all the things she had done, she'd written books, she sang on opera stages. She had this personality which is bigger than life. But she told her story, and there were 8,000 people. You could have heard a pin drop the whole time. She started this way. She says, she said, I've sung on opera stages around the world. She says, I've been at president's inaugurations, I've written poetry, I've written books, but my life hasn't been easy. So let me tell you how it started. She says, I was an unwanted child, and I was shunted from foster home to foster home. So by the time I was 9 years old, I'd been in several foster homes. She says, a shy kid. And she said, and then I ended up in a good home, but it said in a very rough part of a city. So as a 9-year-old girl walking around some apartment buildings in broad daylight, I was dragged into an alley and raped by a man. And she said, I was pretty traumatized by that. But she said, I was further traumatized. She said, when a couple of days later, I heard on the radio, because this man was kind of a street person. So the cops came and picked him up. But she heard that he was murdered in prison, which was murders. Prison sometimes too. She said, and that traumatized her. Said that I went mute and I couldn't speak for 7 years. She went mute and she could not speak for 7 years. And said, because I couldn't speak, they thought I was a slow learner. And I was, she says, and then 7 years later, she says, I was at church one Sunday with my mother. And it was Easter Sunday. And they read the gospel about Jesus rising. She said, and I thought, if God can raise a dead body from the dead, maybe he can raise a dead voice. Since I went home, I tried talking and it works. Then I tried singing and it worked. And it's kept working. She said, from that day on, she said, I began growing. I began to let go of hurts. And so that sometimes people say, Maya, how did he do this? And she said, folks, it's called the resurrection. She said, and we owe it. We owe it to our families and our loved ones to come out of the tombs we're in. She says, that's what the resurrection means. Not just that Jesus was raised, but that we can somehow roll back the stones that have entombed us and come out and walk. And she said, said, it's the resurrection. Said, there wasn't some psychological therapy or whatever. that did this, and so on. She said, everything dead can be raised. I remember a song way back when I was a kid. You might remember the song, famous song by Joan Baez, where she sang the song, "The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down." Remember that song? Anyway, she's in the song at one point, she says, singing about her brother. She said, he was just 18, was proud and brave, when a Yankee laid him in his grave. She said, I swear by the mud below my feet, you can't raise life up when it's in defeat. In fact, you can. You can. Julian of Norwich, the great mystics, Julian of Norwich said, her famous line that everybody quotes, and it's a great line. She says, in the end, said, in the end, all will be well, and all will be well, and every manner of being will be well. But notice she says, in the end, maybe not today, but basically, Julian of Norwich says, the end of your story is already written, and it's happy. So you're going to have a happy ending, so that you can live life, you can endure pain and so on. You can come out of graves because there's life on the other side. I love a line from Oscar Wilde, who added on to Julian of Norwich, when she says, in the end, all will be well, and all will be well, and every manner of being will be well. And Oscar Wilde said, and if it isn't well, it's still not the end, which is true. None of you have ever woke up dead yet, and you never will. There's always life on different sides of every grave. So it's the central mystery of Christianity, and it's the central mystery of life. So as Christians, we believe we're going to be raised and we're going to live immortally afterwards. But it's also, as Maya Angelou says, it's a mystery for this life. There's a challenge to crawl out of our graves, to let God raise us, to have, resiliency in this life and so on, so that, that we don't stay in the graves. Like Maya Angelou says, you owe it to your family, to your loved ones, to rise, to let God raise you from the dead and not to stay in the graves that we're in. So it's the most joyous Christian day. It's the foundation of Christianity. That the Bible, as you read it, or Gospels, they weren't written the way they're glued together. It started with the resurrection. Then they wrote backwards, filled in Jesus' life, and then filled in the infancy narrative, the Christmas story. Then they wrote forwards in the Acts of the Apostles and Christian history from then. But that's the pivotal point. They didn't start writing a story about Jesus when he was born. They started when he rose from the dead. Then they began to talk about his life, his ministry, and work back to his mother and to the Christmas story and the Immaculate Conception and so on. And then they wrote forward, the Acts of the Apostles, and how the church gradually went around the world, and how eventually we measure time by this event. So I say happy Easter and happy 2022 since this happened.